Bruchim Aboim, B'Shem Irgin Shir Torah. B'Shem Irgin Shir Torah, Moses Boston. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's shir. I'd like to give you a shekach to the supporters of tonight's shir, Be'elam Shem, Elul Nishmas, Rabbi Yosef Viener, Rabbi Yosef Zev, Elul Shalom, Yotzei L'chol Zayin Elul, Nishmas Tzura B'Tzorah Chaim, is sponsored by his brother and sister-in-law from Flatbush. Wesley to have the great zchus of sponsoring a shir, or to help Irgin Shir Torah with our What's This Torah throughout the year by putting an ad in the journal for next week's annual dinner, Wednesday, August 18th, at Young Yishuv Avenue K, for men only. Please call Irgin Shir Torah at 718-851-865. Want to email ist@yeshivanet.com to have this great zchus of our What's This Torah, the rabbim, worldwide throughout the year. Tonight we have the cover to have with us once again Rabbi Yosef Viener, Shlita, Rav Kehilas, Shaar, Hashomyaim, Wesley Hills. Are we late, or is Elul early? So I covered the call line of Viener for tonight's drasha.
There you go. Good. Perfect. Shkoyach Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Bold. Irgin Shir Torah continues this tremendous Kiddush Hashem. And it's always a chizik for me to come back. I'm 3 weeks later than I normally am. It was to give me the opportunity to talk about Elul and Tshuva, which is often what we try to touch upon 3 weeks earlier, because it's Nageya all year round. I'd like to say that I don't make up these titles, so don't blame me, but I made up the title. So I have to remember when we spoke a month or two ago, it was scheduled to be right after Rosh Chodesh, so here we are a day into Elul. And everybody spent the last 3-4 months complaining that Elul is very early. It's the same people who talk about Pesach being early and late, even though Pesach can be early, but again to making an ubaya, it's also against Sanhedrin when you push it off. But in reality, nothing is really early or late. It's a deep psychological inyan that people are really expressing that they don't feel they're ready. It's too early in the summer, which is very human, very easy to understand. And we all sort of suffer from it. What we really mean is we just started enjoying vacation, and why is it that we have to do tshuva already? Which, okay, it's all normal. The question is, part of what we're going to try to discuss tonight is what we focus on in the short time we have, even though I'm here to be the title of good news. You have the same 4 weeks till Rosh Hashanah, the same 10 days till Yom Kippur, and nothing changes, Baruch Hashem. I try to tell the Bachram it's the same Ben Azmanim 3 weeks. This year, they gave me a rough time trying to convince me it wasn't so. We took out a calendar, Tisha B'Av, Rosh Chodesh Elul. It doesn't, for the Americans here, which is everybody, it doesn't feel like it. So we're going to have to overcome that, and maybe some of the things that I'm going to say to myself tonight, and you're going to be overhearing, will ignite something. And I'd like to begin with an interesting conversation I saw that was recorded from a ma'aser where a chassan walked in Slobodka in Eretz Yisrael, walked into the yeshiva, and he was a chassan, and he went over to Rav Chaskel Abramsky, and he asked him for a bracha. And he said, I'm a chassan now, Chaim al Tzavaro, and I have responsibilities, and I really enjoyed my learning, which was uninterrupted, and now I have other responsibilities as well. He was going into the Kehilas, but he wanted a bracha that he should continue to bring up the level of his learning and continue learning with Asmada and Amelus. So, of course, Rav Chaskel said, my bracha is not going to help you learn, which one could argue. But he said, I am an older person, I have some life experience, so I can share with you one idea, and I think this really speaks to the problem. We all want to learn, we all want to grow, we all want to prove our midas, work on a Hashomyaim. It's just the timing, and it's the middle of the summer. So Rav Chaskel told him this was his whole bracha. You should continue to learn the rest of your life without making any hachanas, which is quite a soundbite if you think about it. Bracha is you should learn without hachanas. Now, we discuss hachanas in many different aspects. Hachanas can play a role and often play a role in hachana for a mitzvah. And you want to make sure you're doing hachanas to do it right. You want to make sure you're not missing zmanim, which is always a ben zmanim focus in terms of how to have a slightly lighter schedule and still do all the things you're supposed to do. It's not ben zman anymore. We're not going to focus on that. And for many of the people here, Baruch Hashem, your Sadarim were the same, because some of you might have been continuing to work so you could pay for your children's ben zmanim, and that's wonderful. And often the schedule is tight with good things around the year, and there's no big time out, but there is a vacation. So whether it's vacation, whether it's when you're coming off from the office, whether it's Sadarim and Yeshiva, Chatzkel says, when it comes to learning, the mode should be, as soon as you have the opportunity to start learning, sit down and open the Gemara. If you make too many achanas, that's Yetzer Hara's way of getting you to push it off so he can take the enthusiasm that you have and try to put it down a few notches, and then delay it and delay it. The Yetzer Hara wants to delay it and cancel it, even if it doesn't manage to do that, but delay it enough that it won't be the same as Lavas. So, Chatzkel says that your main thing should be to learn without hachanas. Now, hachanas in terms of general planning in life, in terms of ishtadlus, so we have zayas hapecha, and we have all sorts of issues and klolos that we have to fulfill. Lamaisa, and this is not to place blame on it, it's very human, and we all went through this, and we still go through this, but I try to at least tell the Bachurim, it's always good when you become an adult, so we do this with our children as well. We always try to prevent them from making the same silly mistakes. So we give Musar, and we try to talk to them, and how, been there, done that, and you don't have to waste time on this, and don't do that. How much of it works, you try. And why not give an Eitzah to the younger generation? Lamaisa, when I tell the Bachurim in 7th grade, is going to be a lot of hak and some hysteria about the decision of which Mesifta you go to. You don't have to start 3 days into 7th grade. You don't even have to start 3 days into 8th grade. And the decision has to be made, but the Yetzer Hara wants to confound, confuse, and waste a lot of our time, and therefore he keeps us in a mode in life where we're always thinking of the next stage without the ability to savor the moment, enjoy, and I say enjoy in Ruchnius, which is also a Gashmistic enjoyment as well, and to live in the moment and make a decision when you're pressed to make a decision with the proper information. And we, looking back at life, no matter how old you might be, a 9th grader can look back and see, I didn't need a year and a half for that. I didn't even need a half a year for that. You do your due diligence and you make the right decision. And then I warned them in 9th grade, now you're settled. But then 10th grade is sometimes, maybe I can go to a better place, maybe I should switch. And then you can waste a lot of time on that. Sometimes that's necessary, but often the Yetzer Hara has an arsenal limited because he can't go up to a frum person, ben Terry, somebody, a bachal in a yeshiva, and can't one morning, hey, you want to do an avera? That's not going to work. So he has to just make everybody all for tumult that you're doing very well now. However, you should really start planning, or maybe you can switch, or maybe you can improve. So he's saying improving is good for our ruchnias. Yes, we work on that all the time, but not if it always comes to our mind, the middle of learning, or Shemona Esrei. That's the litmus test, by the way. When did you think of this brilliant idea? First thing I ask people. And sometimes they start hemming and hawing. And it can happen. The Chazon Ish says the only regret he had about the shidduch, the stipler and the sister, is that the idea popped into his head in the middle of Shemona Esrei. Chazon Ish. That's the only regret. The rest was history. So Chazon Ish thinks very quickly. So it popped in his head for 1 minute out of a long Shemona Esrei. So that means no one is a malach. But often, as soon as you sit down to learn, whether you're Yeshiva Bacha, whether you're now getting to Sadarim, no doubt this happens to most people on a daily basis. You remember 1,000 things that you have to do, and a lot of them are even mitzvahs. And mitzvahs, okay, so you try to get the office out of your head, and all the other things pressing, and all the chayvus, all the other things that are going on, but mitzvahs? The Biskarov once made a comment, said that if it's a mitzvah shebegufo that only you can do, then if that's the psak in that situation, you have to close the Gemara and you have to take care of it. If you have any suffix, and there are a lot of cases with sfeikis where you don't know what to do, the fallback position is, the muhsak is the Yechayev and Talmud Torah. He says that's why Talmud Torah connected Kulam is there. It outweighs any other mitzvah, unless you're sure that you have to go do what you think you have to do. And if you can't prove it, then it's probably the Yetzer Hara whispering in your ear. Why learn Gemara? You're going to get much too much schar for that. Go do something else. And the Chafetz Chaim used to say, Yetzer would rather us say Tehillim, which is Gavaldik, and Davin, which is also a wonderful thing, and run around and do all sorts of things, as long as that sefer is closed. For the men here and for the women who Nashim Tzidkanias want their husbands to learn, want their children to learn, and lots to do at home, and lots of mitzvahs to do, this has to be front and center in knowing your enemy. So, Chaz Karbansky says the first thing is no hachanas, no flapan, just sit down. And he would go on to say, whatever pops into your head is probably a suffix at best, and you're muhsuk that now you have a chiyuv to learn. It can apply in other areas of ruchnius as well. Whenever you're doing something, if every time you do something, the Yetzer Hara says, why do this? Anybody could do this. Do something better. Even if it's not learning versus something else, you have to question where that's coming from. The focus and the planning in life, the 9th grade, we left in 10th grade thinking of switches, and he didn't, and then 11th grade, think of first year base medrash, and you know the pattern because you all went through it. And second year base medrash, and then Eretz Yisrael, and then Shidduchim. I have people telling me a mazel tov that they, Baruch Hashem, just had their first einikel, and right after this simcha, they're really going to sit down and start with Hasmada Meruba. But it's been very busy for the past 42 years. Sounds funny, but if you fast forward, Mesifta, Beis Medrash, Eretz Yisrael, Shidduchim, and the first baby, and the second baby, and I have people who almost swore in a Sefer Torah they were getting rid of certain devices before they were married. And then I was at the bris. I said, I'm so happy to be here, but not for the reason you think I'm happy. I'm always happy to be at a bris. Happy to be at a bris because that's a raya the baby was born. And I say, remember our conversation? He says, yeah, it's, but till they're 3, they're really not a gila chinuch. And then I show up at the bar mitzvah, I make it a point too. And the bar mitzvah says, kids today, says it's already, but he's on his own already, so it's not, the other ones are very young. So, Yetzer Hara has us making plans we shouldn't make plans, and then sticking to the plans we should be making. It has all sorts of excuses. There's a pasuk by Yeshua ben Nun that talks about his burial place, and there are 2 psukim. It's Timnas Cheres and then Timnas Serach, and it's the same place with the letters out of order, and there's no misprint. So Chazal darshan that Cheres was, they put a piece of pottery in the shape of a sun. The Shaila, how can you make a picture of a sun? Shaila v'nista d'oraisa, but that's not the sukkah tonight. They put on his matzeva a sun. Why would they put on the matzeva a sun? As you all know, Yeshua ben Nun stopped the sun. In the middle of a battle, needed daylight, and they were just about winning, and they needed more time, and he asked the Kodesh Baruch Hu to stop the sun. And they put the sun on the matzeva. So why did they put the matzeva? To show that he was so great that he was able to stop the sun. So the Chazal's comment is to show, Rashi quotes this a few times. Rashi says, people would visit the kever, and they would learn such tremendous musar that even a person could accomplish so much. Yeshua ben Nun is the second to the Messiah from Moshe Rabbeinu. Conquered Eretz Yisrael, stopped the sun, and he's lying under this matzeva. And that's supposed to be a sobering thought. One of the reasons you visit a kever of a tzaddik, you want to daven, but you also can see, Yeshua ben Nun is the classic example of this, is here's a man who is so strong and his rukni is responsible for Klal Yisrael's coming to Eretz Yisrael, the whole Messiah, and he stopped the sun, and we're putting a symbol to remind everyone, and he died. So is that a critique? Had Khan is the Chazal. Is that a complaint? And he died. Well, he died. He's a Basar V'dam. Moshe Rabbeinu also died. The answer is that there's not a whole lot of time. It's not going to be that pessimistic, this drasha. This is the first two parts of the only sobering parts, but it is the beginning of Elul. And the theme is, are we on time? Is Elul on time? Is Elul early? The reaction which we all have is, we're not ready quite yet, and we're working on it, and we mean well, which we do, Baruch Hashem, and we're growing sort of, but it's our house is convinced we're growing fast enough, and you needn't go any faster. And Klai Yisrael understood, they should put on Yeshua ben Nun's kever, that this tzaddik buried here was able to do anything, and when his time came, he couldn't do anything. Which is an incredible, to say, well, he accomplished so much, but that's not why they put the sun there. It wasn't to remind you of the great nace that took place. It was to make sure everybody understands there isn't unlimited time. And I think, see the Mefarshim say this, I think Dafka Yeshua ben Nun, despite the fact he was the most accomplished person as Moshe Rabbeinu, he was supposed to live 120 years, and he lived 110. Because he had a cheshbon that if he goes a little slower, Klai Yisrael will need him more, not for his own longevity, and they won't slip. And he knows after he's no longer here, there's going to be some slippage. So he decided to conquer more slowly because he's supposed to take care of everything. And because of that cheshbon, he meant well. Because of that cheshbon, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said you can't play around with the clock when it comes to mitzvahs. And he lived 10 years shorter because there's no contract. And Shlomo Melech, with his great plan, fantastic plan, L'Shem Shamayim, to bring the Mashiach and bring all the kings and princes, Neumas Eilam, to Yerushalayim to see Yad Hashem, so they could do tshuva, keep Zion mitzvahs, and bring the Tkufas of Geula. And it was a great plan, a perfect plan. Had he lived as long as he thought he would live, he probably would have been able to do it. The way he did it is he married every princess he could find to bring the Shver and the Shvager to Yerushalayim so that they can all witness Yad Hashem. And it's a great plan. Everybody would be duly impressed. The only small issue is that he died, relatively young. The Kodesh Baruch Hu said that you're going to be the example. You can't tamper with mitzvahs, and you can't assume you have X amount of time to carry out all your plans. And the last sobering fact before we get to the tactics on the ground, the Vilna Gaon says, there's a lot of discussion in the Sfar Mekdeshim about the various levels of din, the 7 types of dinim that the neshama goes through. So if you ever read the Shaar Gemul, which is not for the faint of heart, so you get the impression Gehenim, if the description of Ramban is that 1 minute of Gehenim is worse than all Yisuria Iyov down here on earth, Rahman al-Islam, so you think that's the spitz, that's the pinnacle. The Vilna Gaon says that actually the worst one is pretty immediate. When a person's nifta, they put him on the floor and he's got to wait for the levaya, which is why we try to do it relatively quickly. And malachim come. You would say, we don't know much about malachi chavalon, we try to stay away from them, hope we will. Malachim come and they show him, based on his shirish haneshama, what he could have accomplished. And that's in the first few hours, and the Gaon says that's the worst part of it. So, it's an interesting thing to focus on. You would think, if Malachim are coming, they should talk about Averas. They didn't mention anything about Averas. They didn't do anything wrong. Just what he assumed he would get to if he had more time, and what the plan was, and how he was planning and planning and planning and planning. And Chazkel didn't give the bracha, or it wasn't taken, that you just gotta stop making kachanas and sit down and learn and sit down and execute the plans in other areas of mitzvahs. And the first thing the neshama sees is, I had this much potential, and the good news is still nice amount of olam haba, which everybody would say, okay, that's good enough for me. But apparently, the way I heard this without the gun is that the whole Gehenim is like that. You're watching what you could have done. But the gist of all this, and then we're going to go on to the tactics which are more upbeat and less scary. The sum total of this is that I'm talking to great people who spend their life focusing on their ruchnius. Why else would you come out in the pouring rain to a shiur? Especially in the middle of the summer, when you could still maybe be on vacation. And we're talking about people who are trying to make plans, and what we're trying to learn is that, number one, with all humility aside, we're a lot greater than we think we are, and you could do a lot more. And that takes some planning, and you have to ask Eitzes and give an honest appraisal. Not fool yourself, which we'll get to soon. And you have to not let life get in the way. Otherwise, you get distracted, and distractions upon distractions, which we spoke a little bit about last year when we were coming out of a big distraction. And people are still getting distracted by, I promise people I'm a big makel. You could be Yetzi, the mitzvah of reading the news, if there is such a mitzvah, in a few minutes. You don't need chazara, you don't need commentary, you don't need everybody's opinion. And you can find out what's going on in the world, and I assure you if the Mashiach comes, they will let you know. And it becomes not only a waste of time, Basher Husham, it becomes a mindset of very dreary things often. People say, well, you have to know what's going on, and that's just the way it is. It's dreary. No, it's not. Klal Yisrael, by nature, is very upbeat. If we weren't, we wouldn't be here a long time. Liban HaTorah is the most thrilling thing you could do. Mitzvah, tzedakah, chesed, shmir saloshin is the absolute pinnacle in terms of shviras amidus. When you want to say something, you're biting your tongue might hurt a little bit, but you will have the nicest feeling, the most geschmacka feeling you can have in terms of, look what I just did. I wanted to dish it out, I wanted to say something, I wanted to listen to something, and I didn't. That's more fun than anything you did this summer. After the shiur, I'll hear some commentary on what you did this summer, and I'll prove that. But whatever you're trying to do, in terms of a thrill, there's nothing more thrilling in a positive way than working on your ruchnius. And the problem is that we create more distractions, and there are enough in life built in. And then, even if we're not looking at everything that's going around more than we should, we have what we feel are built-in distractions that give us some sort of patur. So let me begin with that. Very interesting Gemara in Pesachim. And when I talk about Talmud Torah, it's Keneged Kulam, the Nashim Tzikani is listening. This is just as much Nageya to you. You have people around you who need help, whatever position they might be. So, if I were to give you a multiple choice of the greatest Amoraim, there's usually 2 and 3 in every dar. There's one particular Amora who was an Eloi, a Masmid, is really responsible, those 2 or 3 Amoraim are responsible for the Messiah to the next generation. And he was Abaye's Rebbe. Did I give enough simanim? Who am I talking about? What? Rabbi Yosef. So Rabbi Yosef, no? Nice name, but that's not why I brought it up. Halavai. Shafani Shaykhas. So, Rabbi Yosef, you would think, okay, if you're Elul like that, and you have Talmidim like that, you have Masmid like that, so of course you're going to become an Amora. So, Mar Pesachim and Kuf Yud Gimel makes a statement. Tana Rabbanim, Shleisha Chayim Ena Chayim. The 3 people who are so distracted, they're distracted with distractions as they worry about what's distracting them, and a few more. And each one of these is a problem, and 3 of them together should be a huge issue. Shleisha Chayim Ena Chayim. Rachmanim is a wonderful midah. Rachmanim over here means they have too much rachmanis. They can't function. A lot to be said for that. We have no time to go into each one. They're too emotional. Raschanim. Also emotional. They get by nature, get very angry, get very hot, very quickly. And Anini Adas. Anini Adas, what's Anini Adas? An istinus. Somebody gets heckled very, everything's got to be just so. And they see dust, that's it, they're the ice mensch. The Gemara then says, Rabbi Yosef commented about himself that I have all 3. Not 1, not 2, but 3. So it's a very powerful Gemara because You'd say a lot of people just pot to themselves. I'm too emotional, too excitable, to this. I'm just not. I can't do as well as other people because I have these midas. Everybody has these inborn things, various degrees. It's called your neshama, your job, your set of circumstances, your mazel. And Rabbi Yosef said that from the time he was born and as he was developing, he had all three. No. Rabbi Yosef's favorite holiday, Shavuos, Kama Yosef Ika B'Shuka. That could have been a Joe in the street. And he recognized that he didn't give himself credit for knowing what he knew. He was born with a very good head. He didn't give himself credit even for the hasmada, which he could have. The only comment we have is that I had 3 handicaps. Rabbi Yosef has said, I have 3 handicaps. The Gemara says, Shleisha chayim eino chayim. It's hard for them to live. They're always getting bent out of shape. And yet, he became Rabbi Yosef. We're not looking to get to Rabbi Yosef's ankle. We're looking to understand that with all due anivus, we give ourselves a pass because we get very humble. Mani, miani, and I can't do it because I have this handicap and that hang up and this. And we go through life like this and we think we're potter. Everybody has certain handicaps that they were created with in order to overcome them. That's the whole tachas hachayim. The guy says a bad midah, your whole thing in life is to overcome it. And the fact that Elul comes exactly when Elul is supposed to come, a month before Rosh Hashanah. So people want to know. Rosh Chodesh was yesterday. What are you supposed to do during Elul? What are you supposed to do for a month? The answer is, number one, so far, learn how to live within the moment and not make too many plans for the next year, 2, 3. But for the next month, the plan is to raise the bar in your self-esteem, if you'll call it, and believe the malachim who come achameh ve'esrim to tell you you're a lot greater than you gave yourself credit for and you could do a lot more. So instead of hearing it from them, hear it from Makaris and Chazal and understand that the time is limited and you could do a lot more. You can't concentrate and you're getting nervous about this, that, and the other thing. Everybody gets nervous about a lot of things. The key in life and the avodah of Elul is first how to cut out the peripheral static that we seem to have, and it's just growing and growing. And you will still find out about the major events in life. Aren't too many things like that going on. It's all the same chazara. And limit your accessibility to those devices and those people who have nothing to do but shoot the breeze about everything that's going on, even though there's no consequence to their avodas Hashem. It's here to distract us from our avodas Hashem. And then understand that there are many great people, not even to the Madrega of Rabbi Yosef, who understood that if I keep feeling sorry for myself and just say, this is the way I am, you'll do mitzvahs, you'll be from, you'll go to Olam Haba, but the bleachers, lahavdil alef avdalis, is not where you want to be, and people get very humble about that and said, yeah, I've always been a bleacher type of guy, and I'm not too fussy about my seat. It's easy to say that when you're in Olam Hazeh. So step number one is to recognize the things that are distracting and recognize the things in the personality that get on your nerves. I can't tell you how many people, I've said this in various forms over the years, and they say, no, I was told by certain people, I won't mention who told me that I have to work it out and I have to talk about it, and there's room for that, but not for 42 years. It's just, and Ladava said, talking, and a lot of these traits doesn't make anybody evil. Everybody has this. And they're waiting for the day that they're finally going to be clear, and it's not going to be on their head, and everything's going to be smooth sailing. If that were the case, there wouldn't be much schar for avodas Hashem. So the 30 days in Elul tonight, tomorrow morning, is to write down what's distracting me, what can I ignore just for the next 30 days. First try it for 30 minutes, and then for a day, for 30 days, and then for 7 weeks. Yom Naram is Sachakol, 7 weeks, give or take. And the siyata shmaya you're going to get from the increased clarity in your mind and davening and learning and the chesed you're doing without the hang-ups and without what are they going to think and why didn't they say thank you and why can't these people say please. And they spend most of their life worrying about all the things that are being said about them and all the people that are not expressing Hakaras HaTov, they really should, and all the people that are not so nice and they should be nicer. I'm not condoning it. But in a real world, our chiyuv is to do what Ratzon Hashem is and not worry about what everybody else is thinking or saying, because in Hashem's scorecard, kaviyachol, doesn't make a difference. If anything, you get more schar. In order to do this, you have to be incredibly honest, which is difficult to do. One of the great challenges in life is being honest with other people. And I think the great unknown and undiscovered aspect of honesty is that it's probably harder to be honest with yourself. Because if you're honest, and people complain to me, they think like they're working on what I said, but they're becoming a Baal Gaiva. What can I do about it? I said, the Gaiva's on me. Just keep growing. He keeps coming back. He's worried about the Gaiva. So the fact that you realize you could do a lot more doesn't mean you're a Baal Gaiva. It means you're being practical and you want to use the time properly. And the question is, who do you listen to? So we've had Nevi Sheker for a long, long time. We had Nevi Emes, Baruch Hashem, plenty of them. The Umas Olam had Nevi Sheker, and a couple of times where our Nevi'im would tell them what's going on. Very rare. But every society had people saying all sorts of things, and they were often paid for it. And if you were a false prophet, I don't use the word Nevi Sheker, because let's say by the Umas Olam walking around in Rome, what would you say? Well, you would say, if you were really not normal, ridiculous, crazy things, and sometimes nevuah by a cotton or by a shaita, maybe it would happen to be true, maybe not. The Nevi Yisrael were here to give Musar and to speak the Emes. One particular Gemara comes to mind that just says, there are many examples of this, but this one's pretty powerful. There's a Gemara Sanhedrin on Pei Tes, where it describes what was going on with Achav. If you remember, Achav was probably one of the most powerful kings we ever had. He was a very confused person. He was a Chati Machtis Aram, big time Eved of Azara. He married Izevel, which was part of the problem, maybe most of the problem. He himself had Zchuyas. He was very powerful, very wealthy, conquered Kamat, the entire Middle East. And he gave money to Lemdei Torah. It's unclear to me whether he gave to yeshivas or he gave out a lot of government money, and Mamela helped Lemdei Torah. I would guess the latter because he wasn't that nice, but Lamaisa was his chus. And in Hashomyaim, there were paskening Kaviyachol what to do with him. But he's also supporting a lot of Torah. That's the worst thing and the best thing you could do, by the way. So it was kind of deadlocked. And they were looking for a tiebreaker, and the tiebreaker, unfortunately, was the murder that he had on his hands. Even didn't do personally, but Izevel got rid of Novus, if you remember, because Achav wanted the vineyard, wasn't going to kill anybody about it. Izevel was brought up in a very different environment than Achav. Foreign princess, she says, you wimp, probably called him something like that, and said, well, I grew up, my father would not take that, and the guy would be no longer among the living. And Achav sort of shrugged his shoulders. And then she took that as not a no, so she took care of it herself, had him framed, and unfortunately he was killed. Achav was blamed for not making a malchah because he should have known what Izevel was up to. So the Ruach of Novus is in Hashomyaim now. Novus was a good person. And the Ruach wanted Nekama. By a murder, he's got to get to Hashomyaim because he wanted Nekama. It wasn't just enjoy Olam Haba. But that's not a taina. When it comes to the victim, there's a Gal Adam. There's a lot going on with Ritzicha, Rachmal Hassan. It's a big problem. And he wanted Nekama, so Kosh Baruch Hu asked for a volunteer, so to speak. Who's going to be the Ruach? Who's going to be a spirit, the mouthpiece, in the mouth of the Nevi Sheker to convince Achav to go to war and get killed? The psak was, he loses 51-49, and now we just want to set him up. So there was only one place, one battle he lost in Ramas Gilead against Aram, and Achav didn't like losing, and he had a big desire for power, and he said, I'm going to fight, we're going to get back Ramas Gilead. I'm sure he dressed it up in all sorts of nationalistic things, not right, they have a city in Eretz Yisrael, and Jewish pride, we're not going to let them get away with it, even though it was personal pride, nothing to do with the agenda for Eretz Yisrael. And the day he was discussing it, Yehoshaphat, his mechutin, who was a Heilig Tzaddik, came and he was trying to be a Makar for him all the years. Achav started doing tshuva. Yehoshaphat agreed to give him Malkus. Can you imagine giving him mechutin Malkus? Don't make me smile. Achav, to his credit, let him do it. Every day he'd come and give Malkus, and he was doing tshuva, and then his wife, Izabel, got a hold of him and talked him out of it, and he went up and down and up and down. Yehoshaphat was there, and Achav said, "But I'm glad you came to visit. I'm thinking of a campaign. What do you say?" So Yehoshaphat's trying to be a Makar of him. He almost gets killed doing this. He said, "Whatever you need, I'm with you. My army's with you. Great idea. Let's go. However, before I officially agree, we got to ask a Navi, and let's see what he says. Get back a city in Eretz Yisrael might be a good idea." So Achav said, "That's all you need, just a Navi. I got plenty of Naviim. They're all on staff. Paid good salaries." And he calls Tzidkiah ben Kanana and all the Naviim, and they say what they're paid to say, which is what they always say. "Your Highness, great idea." They probably didn't even hear what he said yet, but Your Highness, is a great idea. It's always the answer. And why don't you go? And Yehoshaphat is looking at this, and he says, "My dear Mechutin, do you have anybody who tells the truth here?" So he said, "What's wrong with all these?" Now, there's something, you all know the story. Something is wrong. Achav wasn't born yesterday. That's the chutzpah that tells Mechutin, who knows the big tzaddik, he knows the difference. There's the chutzpah to tell him what's wrong with these. These guys are paid employees. So there's a machlokes, Rashi, the Mefarish and Divrei Yamim, and the Radak. Who were these clowns? So the Radak and most Rishonim say they were Nevi'ah Sheker who were on payroll, and they always agreed, whether they agreed or not. And Rashi says, no, they, over here at least, were actually Nevi'ah Emes. They themselves probably were surprised. I shouldn't say all this, but all of a sudden they felt something coming out of their mouth that really sounded like the truth. And this confused Achav, because Achav thought it sounded real, and Yehoshaphat also was a bit thrown off. So the Gemara records the conversation. Yehoshaphat tells Achav, "Well, why don't you get real ones? What's wrong with these? Sounds like they're telling the truth. Maybe only this time, but it sounds like the truth." And Yehoshaphat said, I'm putting this into the Gemara, but I think that's what was going on in the background, because they're talking about both of them knew what was going on in the world. Yehoshaphat was a million times as great. But Achav is insisting. He's hiding the fact they're on payroll. Well, who's he trying to fool? So Yehoshaphat told him, "I have a Messiah from my father's father's father, going back to David HaMelech, that ain't Shnei Nevi'im Esagim B'Sikin Echad. They can't be saying the same thing, and they're all talking the same exact language, and that's not the way Nevuah comes, and therefore there's something wrong." I'd like to know, why don't you just say something's wrong? These guys are on your payroll, and they always lie, and then Nevi'ah Sheker. Why do you have to come onto a Messiah to prove it? The answer is because Achav also knew that. I believe he wouldn't have the chutzpah to say that, but he said, this one sounds real. And the reason it sounded real is because there was a real spirit, min Hashomyaim, who was in the mouth of Tzidkiah ben Kanana, saying you should go. And Yehoshaphat said, "I'm a little confused, but I have this Messiah. It sounds the same, and I don't think it's true. Let's ask the one Navi." And of course he said, "Your Highness, very dangerous, you're going to get killed, don't go." And he flew into a rage, Kedarka Betuma, and he said, "You're always out to get me, and I'm coming back. When I come back, you're going to get killed." He's not coming back. He never came back. And he thinks he's coming back. They go into battle. And the last strange piece in this is Ben Hadad, who is the opposing king, tells his men, go into battle, unusual instructions. He always just told them, go fight and fight well. Here he says, don't shoot at anybody. Just shoot at the Melech Yisrael. What brought that on? So they start shooting, and he had gone incognito because he was deep down worried about the Nevuah. And Yehoshaphat was in a royal carriage. They started shooting at him, and Yehoshaphat almost got killed as an einish for hanging around Achav too much. And can have a negative ashpah because he was that bad. And he died in the last moment. He was saved, and then one stray bullet, arrow in this case, killed Achav. Why did Ben Hadad give that strange instruction? The answer is he had spies in the Jewish camp, and he heard the whole back and forth with the Nevi'ah Sheker and the one Navi Emes. And guess what? Surprise, surprise. Ben Hadad, as from as he wasn't from at all. He's an Avodah Rosh Musha. He believed the Navi Emes. So you got the situation over here. The Melech Yisrael Achav believes the Nevi'ah Sheker. Ben Hadad, the opposing guy's general, believes the Navi Emes, and Yehoshaphat is a little bit confused, but he said, I have a Messiah, and I think they're not telling the truth. Just why did Ben Hadad believe his own spies came and said, they had a very interesting conversation. He said, the guy's right, and Achav's going to kill, don't waste any ammunition, just shoot Achav. So how did he know? What's the deep, dark secret? It's a very simple thing. You hear what you want to hear in life. So you had a very confusing matzav. You had the strength in numbers, l'chayra. That could be a problem for your ruchnius if you look around the world. And got a few hundred, and they're saying, go to battle, and you're going to win. And I got one lone guy saying you're going to get killed. So how did Ben Hadad believe the one guy? The answer is he wanted to believe it, because if he's going to get killed, that means I'm going to win. And Achav wanted to win, so he believed the other ones. And Yehoshaphat was confused because he felt this was a ruach in their mouth, and it sounded like it was min Hashomyaim, and it was. But it was min Hashomyaim, but not as a nevuah to get Achav killed, and it was novice. That's a very esoteric, confusing matzav. The reason I picked this example is because people are always looking for signs from the heaven. And they're always looking for simanim, and they're looking for hechsher stempel, basically, on their lifestyle and what they're doing. And they're bringing me, I've heard some very fascinating rayas. I had a guy once, he was on his way with a certain project, which was really not pashut, hashkafically and otherwise. And he saw in the sky, a blimp went by with a message, which he told me afterwards, he was so excited. I said, I don't know how you made the tushtel from that blimp, of that message to the project you're working on, but he took it as a sign from the heavens, literally. It had some advertising blimp, and he was thrilled. I said, I don't know if we're on the madrega to be able to do that. So we're looking for simanim, we're looking for rayas that our derech is fine, or that we should switch, and really it's Yetzer Hara worried we're going to strike too much, and therefore we should get distracted. Or Yetzer Hara is very happy with what we're doing, because we never asked the shayla, and he's trying to bring us rayas that there's no shayla to ask. Ukehena. And you can have a matzav where, in this case, the bad guys believed the truth because it happened to align with their hashkafas hachayim. And we don't have Nevi'im today. We don't have an Urvatumim. So the only guidepost we have is Shas and Peskim, and the people who are trying to hopefully interpret it and give some hadracha. But the last person who's going to get it right is the person who's in the matzav. This is the introduction, and I see we're already 3/4 of the way through. So let me go to the many, many optimistic things that we can do with our Avodas Hashem, and it'll even address the people who are still nervous about the general matzav. I wasn't born in Europe. I didn't live in Europe. I did in my younger years, like ending 4 years ago. So how old could I have been? My grandmother, La Shalom, was Nifteris at 99 and a half. My grandfather at 100, or something like that, give or take. And I often quote them because I just realized over the years you can ask a lot of things of what was really going on. Like when my grandmother got visibly upset and I started asking her about all the herbs and things growing. She had a green thumb, too. And she had all sorts of things growing, and I started looking at the stuff and asking her about bugs. He says, wait a thing, we didn't have bugs in Europe? He says, there's certain things we didn't eat for entire seasons. People think this chumrah was born in America. Just for the record. That's a pretty priceless piece of information. The reason the Americans think it was born in America is because for 40 years in between, they used DDT enough to kill all the mice and humans and everything else and other critters who were feeding, and then all of a sudden they stopped because they realized the protein's healthier than the stuff they were using. So it's not like, she said, of course we had things, and we grew the stuff over the summer, and there's certain things we couldn't eat, and we had to check, and that's not a new chumrah, just for the record. So she did tell me in many different ways that of all the things that go on in life and all the trouble around the world, she spent the latter part of her years in America, like the last 70 or 75. Born in Vienna and married in Vienna after Kristallnacht with the curtains drawn with 10 people there. It's one picture. So you say, who bought the flower arrangements? It's actually one person came with flowers, and they almost that are committed, because they said it's not a chiv yahar v'yaver to walk through the streets with Nazis around with flowers. They could stop you. So once you have a chassan like that, Baruch Hashem, they got married, they were the last people out given passports by their parents who never made it out. And they said, forget the Holocaust, it's just growing up in Europe. Whatever's going on times 10, combine it for a year or two's worth, it wasn't a day or two in Europe. Just there was a different mahalach and it wasn't like that in every part of Europe all the time for the last 5-6 centuries. But we're not mitigating the issues. We're trying to recognize that Baruch Hashem was so spoiled, we should remain spoiled, and we shouldn't have problems knocking on our door as they did for over 1,000 years, where every day was a struggle for sustenance and life and death. We shouldn't go back there because we can't handle it. But the spoiledness, and it should continue the tranquility, relative tranquility, and everything else we have at Biaz Gal Tzedek. But Lamaisa, as soon as we have the slightest there, we go back to that same mode we started with, is as soon as everything is over and as soon as it gets calm again, we're going to be fine. And we're really going to get back to all the things we're working on in our ruchnius and our plans in life. And what we don't realize is there are many, many chazals who say this. One of my favorite is the description of the defeat of Sancheir. Sancheir came with 180,000 troops, and they were just the officers. There were millions when you finish the calculation. And the Gemara says, we all know, the Chizkiyahu looked out the window, and it was like an impossible situation. The Shtadlis wasn't even a geya. And he said, I'm going to lower my drega than my forefathers, David HaMelech, and the other great tzaddikim, and I can't even do any ishtadlus, and I'm going to sleep. I'm saying a good Kriyash Malamita. Hashem, please help us out. This is gone tomorrow morning. And he woke up the next morning and 180,000 troops were dead. So what won that battle? So people mistakenly think it's Chizkiyahu's last tefillah before he went to sleep, and his Amunah Pshuto, that all helped. He had run a program already for years because he knew Sancheir was coming, and he put his famous sword, probably had a sword for each Beis Medrash, the back of every Beis Medrash, and he made it Dina Malchusa Dina. That's a nice catchphrase. He made it the law of the land that anybody who doesn't learn all the time, every moment they have, when they're not trying to grow their tomatoes, is going to be killed by this sword. So all of a sudden, the Beis Medrash was quite full, and anybody who wanted to leave Seder early turned around, saw a big guy with a sword, or saw the sword, and decided, you know what, it's Kedai, wait till the end of this year. And so there's a guy out there in case anybody wanted to leave. That way I can go to 10:30, 11. And there's a king says something, he was king, and I had to listen. So the Mepharshim asked, isn't that a strange place to put a sword? If you had the Hamanam and you felt that the only protection against Sancheir is Limud HaTorah, and Diktik B'mitzvahs, which comes from Limud HaTorah, they said they gave a Bechin afterwards, and every man who was in the Beis Medrash, but every lady and every child knew Tumas and Torah's background, and Midan Vad Be'Sheva. So it wasn't just the men learning the Beis Medrash. They got home, they chazered. It was a smashing success. He wasn't just trying to reinforce Chatzum V'Torah. He was trying to put the Talmud Torah on a pedestal for the obvious result that will help them in the Diktik B'mitzvahs, but the primary result was that there was a lot more learning. So the question everybody asked is, wouldn't it be smarter to put the sword in the shuk, in the stadium, outside the mikvah for the guys who are schmoozing? The Beis Medrash is where the people are learning already. Why put the sword there? It's the last place you need it. These guys already came to the Beis Medrash. You ever think about that? So the answer is, and this makes everybody feel uncomfortable, but it just puts more of an achrayus on us, is that we can't in any matzav say we need chutzim, we need protection, therefore we got to be makar of everybody. We should be makar as many people as we can. It's every single yid who comes is a yid that's saved. The main achrayus is on the people who are already going to the Beis Medrash. The main achrayus is the people who understand the value of the learning and the value of the growth. And Sancheir was done in, the Gemara says, with this particular schus, that people increased the level of what they thought they could do in the first place. How did he do it? He forced the issue. And we can't do this today. It's a democracy, both here and in Eretz Yisrael. Kaviyat Datit is not going to go over very well. Don't use a sword. Use incentives for yourself, use them for your friends, work on it with your friends. One of the things that are highlighted in Hilchos Yom Kippurim, in this most unlikely place, Erev Yom Kippur's dinner Tosefes Yom Kippurim, and there were Nashim Tzidkaniyas who were Tzidkaniyas in other ways, but for some reason Tosefes Yom Kippurim, they were busy cleaning up and never went over well, and they didn't know the din, so it says try to tell them, and if they're not going to listen, Mutav Shishegim. So the Mishnah Berurah and the Bir Lacha go into a whole discussion of when do you apply giving Musar. People don't like to hear Arvis. I heard the Chazal say we don't know how to give Musar today. That thing is overquoted and misquoted. There's a Chiyav D'Oraisa of Arvis, a Chiyav D'Oraisa of a Chiyav D'Oraisa. You have to know how to do it. So instead of giving guy Musar he's not going to listen to and screaming at him, never scream at him, don't embarrass him more than necessary. Go over to him and say, I struggle with this also. Help me. I'll help you. You help me. The biggest chus coming into the Yemei Adin is look around you with the people in the best measure way. Look around people who are interested in doing the right thing and know what your faults are. Assume that he's struggling with the same thing. Go over to him and say, I need help. Can we work on this together? Let's make some sort of deal. We're going to check in with each other in this Yom Ha'arim. Start with a few small things. As the king, as the Melech Yisrael, he understood the buck stops here, even though that's not a Jewish expression. And if there's an enemy coming and there's a matzav of sakana le'aleinu, I have to raise the bar and I have to push this agenda. Baruch Hashem, we don't have 180,000 troops waiting to annihilate anybody, Rahman al-Islam. But all the things that people are worried about, and I'm not saying there's no room for the shtadlis and political action and the safety measures, it's all gewaldig. Chazal tell us in 100 different ways. It depends on our own zchusim, what we're generating, our ruchnias and our hasagas, and it's well within our reach. So that is very good news. People are perturbed to hear it because it puts an achrayas. The achrayas should be daunting, but more importantly, should be thrilling, should be a challenge, should give tremendous sipuk. The happiest people we know are the people who are working on the bitachon, working on the ruchnias, are not satisfied with where they are now because they know these chazals that there's so much more they can do. Yesh lo imano reitzam asay megashmius, like the Gaon compares, like drinking salt water. It's never satisfying, you just get more thirsty. Why did Hashem create a mitzvah like that? The answer is everything we have in Gashmius is Zulum Azum Ruchnius. Hashem created humans to not be satisfied. That's great if you use it the right way. You have a daf, you want two. You have two, you want four. That's the reason this mitzvah was created. And the question is where we're going to use it. The Ishtadlus area is a very fascinating Unkelus. Unkelus usually teaches the words. Here he gives a phrase which is very telling. We just had it in Parshas Ekev. Amarta b'vav chakeich v'etzim yod de'asal yisachayil zeh. Zacharta ki anes l'chakayich lasos chayil. Kadosh Baruch Hu says, don't get haughty on your accomplishments and your gashmias and your parnasa and your money. Remember, Hashem gave you the kayich lasos chayil. So we think it's b'siyat d'shmaya. We did a rashta. Listen, we as from people, b'siyat d'shmaya. I'm not saying we should stop using the expression, but it's a little misleading because B'siyat Shmaya means I'm a Knacker and I'm from Knackers. I know that I need help, so B'siyat Shmaya. Targum Onkelos says not so. Listen to this Targum. Hu yav l'cha eitza lemikni nichsin. He gave you the eitza to buy something. We all know real estate is a great example. Right? There are some people walking around who will be happy to share with you how wealthy they could have been for about 10, 15, $20 million already had they just bought that building at that time. And there's the whole story, how they would have. And they didn't. But they can't understand what happened. Like, they had all the plans. The buildings, whatever profession you happen to be in, the Chazal say there are people who make money, the people who don't make money. And no one's told ahead of time, which is why Hashem keeps it a secret. So everybody would go into each industry so the world can have a kiyum. The uncle has just said, which means that it has nothing to do with your brains. You have to do your due diligence. It has nothing to do with your hishtadlus per se. The final decision, what to buy, when to buy, your house, clinching, your shidduch, your children's shidduchim, the real estate, whatever you're doing has nothing to do with you. He's teaching, doesn't mean he gave you the strength and the intelligence to do it. bypasses the whole thing. Gave you the eitzah to pop into your head what to do l'maisa. Why is that a chiddush? So I saw a very nice sushta on Sefer V'tar Libenu. He points out every Shever Brachas has this. I've heard amazing drashas about this Gemara. Some of them are bordered on kfira. Most of them were good. It's a very dangerous Gemara to talk about, but everybody talks about the Shever Brachas. Everybody knows Bezim and Aleph. Bas plenty leplenty. You start talking about Bechira and saying that you got to know what you're talking about. Most of them come out good. If you mess it up, you could say some things that are pretty outlandish. Sometimes insulting. I was once at a Shever Brachas. I never had to stop somebody from speaking once. I was just listening, and the guy started talking about the Zayar and the Arizal. There really have 5 basherts, and he started talking about the whole orbit and everything, and she's sitting there, the Kala. I started whispering, I don't know if it's a good idea. They're married now. He's talking about all the other options. I said, at a Shaar Brachas, that's not always a great idea. He says, but it's true. I said, not everything is true. A lot of things are true. I can talk about a Shaar Brachas. What does one have to do with the other? So you got to be careful with this Gemara, but the Gemara has a lot of basic kashas. It says, kasha kikriyas yamsuf. Yes, why is it, nothing's hard for Hashem. Why is bas plenty kasha kikriyas yamsuf? Why is panasha kasha kikriyas yamsuf? Why use the expression over here? See, Tainas, I think it's the Pashup Shot. He says, what's Kriyas Yamsuf? Kriyas Yamsuf, it was Nigzer Sheish Mebrashis that it would later split. He says, the Pella is the Mitzrayim followed them in. Were they crazy? That's not only counterintuitive, it's suicidal. They saw every time something happened for the Yidden over the last year, every Makkah, they got clobbered and the Yidden was saved. Why is this not going to be different? So they taka hesitated. The Medrash Parah said, I don't know, this looks like a setup. I don't know if we should go in. And he hesitated before he even left Mitzrayim. He hesitated again, and he went straight in. So basically, HaKadosh Baruch Hu took away his Bechira. Okay. Achbadas Leid Parah. That he should get destroyed. The comparison to Kriyas Yamsuf is that every time we make the decision about the Parnasa and about the Shidduch, Hashem, against his own rules of running the world, Kaviyachol, takes away most of the Bechira. Not all of it. You have to, again, do basic Ishtadlus. But much of life, again, is wasted on planning these major moves. And then afterwards thinking, was that a dumb thing to do? Life is not that long. You spend years and years planning for something. It could have been planned in a few weeks. And then you spend years and years regretting it. So this is all good news. It's not on us. It's not on our shoulders. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kemat suspended 99% of the Bechira over here. That's the Dimyan to Kriyas Yamsuf. It's not our problem. People, unnecessary suffering. He says, not necessary. A guy told me, he says, I have a big problem. Usually after he tells me the big problem, he tells me it is, I tell him it's not such a big problem. Here I didn't say that. I have to be honest. It's a big problem. I said, what's the problem? So he's going to tell me something pinpointed. He said, every single thing he does in life, he has buyer's remorse. He said, every single thing? He said, every single thing. It could be panasa, it could be shidduchim, it could be this, it could be... He gave me a whole long laundry list. That's pretty bad. I said, well, did you make the decision with all the information you had? He said, Avada. He said, did you try your best in Daven HaKadosh Baruch Hu and try to do the right thing? He said, yeah. So what's the problem? He said, I don't know if I was Zeichel Lekach. I said, that frumkeit, that sounds like a very frum answer, no? He doesn't know if he's Zeichel Lekach. I said, that's straight from the Yetzer Hara. Can write the script. HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us, just do the nominal hishtadlus and do the right thing in between the various hishtadlus, and don't spend too much time preparing, because you'll spend your whole life preparing for the next stage, and you'll waste an incredible amount of time. And then afterwards, when you finally take the jump, you'll regret it, and then you'll look around, and now, Kina is human, but the people spend their life to make a career out of this. And they're always looking, if I would have done this, I'd have what he has, and if I would have done that, I'd have that family, and this family. Everybody's always somewhere else. So, Elul is all good news. This makes for a happier existence. It's letting go because it wasn't your domain in the first place. You don't need that much hishtadlus. You're here to do the right thing instead of worrying about carrying the world and worrying about HaKadosh Baruch Hu's world. And this was something he spoke about last year with Corona and many other things that are going on. And after they read the news, even in their quick version, which is not quick enough, Their shoulders are weighed down. It's, I can't function. All these problems, they're coming to get us. I said, who's coming to get you? So he gives me a whole list of this germ and that. He says, even my antibodies are coming to get me now. I don't know what he said. He had a whole sphere why they had too many now. He says there was a plot, and now he has too many. And then in the Middle East, and the Iranians, and now they're coming out with things they can blow up the world in even less time. And if you want to think about this, it's a whole long. None of it is any of our business. So the first thing we got to do for Elul is just clear our mind. How can you learn? How can you daven? How can you be besimcha, which is the key component of all this? Yeah, we're talking about within 45 minutes, the ending of this year now. We're talking about simcha. I started off with the 5 hours after a person's nifter. That's quite a dichotomy. The answer is no. If you realize that life is short and you realize how exciting the possibilities are, you'll jump on them and you'll stop getting distracted. And the Yetzer Hara for from people is not working with an agenda of suggesting Averis, Beferish Averis. It's not going to work. Like a good general, he has to know what's going to work. My favorite mashal is the fellow who was invited to the king's palace for 1 hour because he saved the prince, and he gets to go to the king's treasury and take whatever he wants, and then the king realizes, I got a lot of very valuable stuff in there, diamonds and rubies, and an hour is a long time, and sure enough, the peasant showed up on time, not going to blow this opportunity, with a big sack, and the king told his chief of staff, that's a big sack, and an hour is a long time. So now what? So he got the symphony together, and he got the orchestra, and he got the finest players, and he told them, play like you've never played before. Like something breathtaking, it's going to mesmerize him. Just do something. He's got an hour, and he's got a big sack. So that Yetzer Hara, every time walking to the base medrash, has that panic attack. Like, oh no, he's coming to a shiur. And I had thunder and lightning, and I rained down the whole flatbush, and they still came. And then I tried to blow up all the connections, and they're still watching. And he tried everything else. Now what? They're actually going to learn something and grow. We don't want that. So what is he going to do? So the rest of the story didn't happen to anybody here. These are all pretty attentive. But the peasant walks in with his sack, and they start playing, and he and his village, they didn't even have a broken drum set. He never even saw such instruments. He starts listening. It was beyond gorgeous. And he was mesmerized. And he's sitting, listening. And then like 38 minutes into it, he snaps out of it and says, wait a second, this is nice, but not worth $100 million. And then the king is now became a conductor. He tells the guy, just keep it going. Because as soon as you let this peasant focus, he's going to walk away with a Rechush Gadol. That's the only mashal you need for all of Yom Naram. All Yom Naram is, as from people, the good news is we know what the right thing is, and we want to do it. And the Yetzer Hara really doesn't like us. Actually, he loves us. He's here to give us a challenge so we can overcome the challenge and get Shaar. So he's really on our side, all working for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But right now, he's public enemy number one, and he doesn't like, and he especially doesn't like this time of year. This time of year is really not happy with the general matzav because the Irgun starts inviting people to talk about focusing and ignoring what's going on. It's not that great, but everybody's working for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we have schusim, people want to listen and people want to know. And his main weapon, Bazman Hazeh, is distracting us. That's what's going on. So call it an orchestra, call it bad news, call it fear, hype, hysteria. And again, the pushback when you tell this over to your friends, how happy and calm you are now, I hope, for the next 7 weeks, they're going to say, no, you got to be realistic. You got to know what's going on in the world. And you're going to ask him what's going on in the world. He's going to tell you the world's coming to an end. Okay, that's one way to live. Or you could say, if the world is coming to an end, not coming to an end, I have no idea, but it's not really my problem. Kadosh Baruch Hu's running everything. And the pasuk reminds us, whatever you think you accomplished, Hashem gave that idea into your head. And beyond that, it's not only not our problem, it's counterproductive to dwell on it. famous Maisa. It's all over in Brisk. They had a fire, Rahmal Islam. The towns in Europe, the houses made of wood, they were close together. It was dangerous, and the fire started spreading, and they had a businessman there, and he had a whole warehouse of goods, and the fire was coming down the block, and a guy jumped in and said, Chaim, I'll give you 50% of your warehouse. He had all his goods in there, a lot of valuable stuff. The fire's coming down the block. He said, absolutely not. And then it got closer, and it was 2 doors away, and he said, I'll give you 25%. He said, absolutely not. And then it was right next door. He said, I'll give you 10%. That might be, oh no already. He might be overpaying at that point. He said, no. And then the fire stopped at the doorstep of his warehouse. And he came to the Beis Din the next day, and he was telling some of the people around there, that was like the center of town, Reb Chaim's study was next door. Reb Chaim overheard this guy talking very loud, very animated about his gadlus, that he almost lost all his scheirer for 10 cents on the dollar. Reb Chaim overheard it and saw there was a need to set this hashkafa straight, because we would feel like this. It's a good thing they made that smart decision. So Chaim came out and he told him, I'm very happy your scheirer was saved, but the way you're telling it over, not only wasn't this any godless of your Elul Shachap of what not to sell and when not to sell it, but it was actually a pretty dumb thing to do. Only a tipish wouldn't give your thing is worthless. I don't know why the guy was offering you 10%. It was at your doorstep. So he said, Rebbe, really? I thought that was mamish. He said, it's a great story. I'm happy your stuff was saved. But it teaches us something very different. It teaches us that when Hashem paskins on Rosh Hashanah, that you're going to have X amount of money, you could do the dumbest things in the world and still retain that money. That doesn't mean you should go to work and close your eyes. That means that you could take away 90% of the aggravation. I speak to people who learn a lot, and they're trying to make a living in between, and it's pressurized, and their main concern is not when they're in the office. The problem is they can't leave the office in the office, especially today where they're not even in an office, because they're not going to an office. So they come upstairs, and they go to the Beis Medrash. This is a very human problem. These are great people. I can't leave it behind. The reason you can't leave it behind, if you break it down, is really because you feel that the 8-9 hours of a shadlus you just did is not enough. You need to help HaKadosh Baruch Hu worry about it overnight. And if you worry about it overnight, then if Rahman al is a fire, you'll be able to make decisions on when to sell and what to sell. And so Reb Chaim says, all this proves, I understand why you don't want to sell. You don't want to see your whole warehouse go up and get 10 cents on the dollar. So you were zeichet to, looks like it stopped in that spot, but that just shows that was Nigzar Rosh Hashanah, and even if you don't make the right decision, on paper, mathematically, that was not the right decision. So Reb Chaim says it's a chizuk. Did you see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives a psak on Rosh Hashanah, and come what? That's going to be the psak. But it has a lot less to do with us than we think it does. And that is a very, very optimistic way to approach Elul, which is going to help us decide what the din's going to be. And that is, you don't have to carry it around the whole time. You still don't have to carry it on your sleeve and put everybody else in a bad mood. We'll end off. There's a lot more to say on this. We all know year to year, we've been doing this many years, the last 3 minutes are spent as I skip over all the pages I wanted to discuss. So I'll mention one last item about the Beradon L'Chavero aspect, the chiyuv to help people. The Musar doesn't have to be direct, but there's a chiyuv arvus to get people who are already involved, more involved, to help them drop a lot of the baggage, to help them worry a lot less and get less distracted. If you look at the very end of Shemona Esrei, spoke a little bit about this on Tisha B'Av when I was in Flatbush. It's a little unusual. I'm not going to explain the whole thing now. After Maidim, we had already Bakashas in the middle of Shemona Esrei. Now it's Maidim. And we finish Hadaya, and then we go back to Bakashas again. And we end Shemona Esrei, Sim Shalom, which is Bakashas. Again, there's a mahalach why that is. And then after Yili Ratzon, we end Shemona Esrei with more bakashas. I think it's very, very fascinating to take note of how we end Shemona Esrei. And we're signing off now, and this is an audience of the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So the ending is very important. The beginning is the Shvach, rightfully so. We're coming to the Melech Malchim Melachim. But now we're ending off. We want to put in a few words like Ne'ilah. So what are we going to put in? What's highlighted here? We do this 3 times a day. But after a while, hopefully we start noticing these things. And we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu the parting request, Nitzar L'Shani Meira. Can you imagine how important this is? We put this on a pedestal. This is what we want to leave Shemona Esrei with. Is at the end of the day, which the Chafetz Chaim tells us, what whole sefer on it, and the Volna Gain says, and everybody says it's all through Shas, and that is, everything is in the power of your tongue. And you can use your tongue to encourage people, and to help them worry less, and to help them learn more, and do more chesed, and practice their own Shemiras HaLashon. It starts with, it's all the shiny meira that I have to start ignoring not only all the distractions, but the people around me who don't always say things the nicest way, and don't always do the nicest thing, and don't always react properly, because they're human and I'm human. And the quicker I can forget that, the better off we are, because if I remember their comments, and I remember everything they say, and I hold grudges, and I carry it around with me, so I'm helping HaKadosh Baruch Hu remember Kaviyachol that he did me an avla, so he should do what with it? Rachman's not punish him. We don't want that. Nobody, you don't want anybody to get punished in your God. So why are you remembering it? Why are you still carrying it around? He owes me an apology. Okay, so comes every Yom Kippur. If that doesn't happen every Yom Kippur, so how many years do you? This takes up bandwidth. There's only X amount in the head. So if you don't drop and lighten the load, you can't stay afloat. That's the theme of everything we discussed tonight. So the first ingredient is Nitzar L'Shani Meira. I should stay out of the Lashon Hara business and stop criticizing others or tining on others. Svasai Medaber Mirma is I shouldn't tell an untruth to somebody else, and I shouldn't be not truthful with myself, which is the first part of this shmooze. Be honest with yourself and give yourself a lot more credit for what you can really accomplish. It's easier to be humble in that department. Kalai nafshi sidam, I should be able to ignore the comments, even if I'm not talking Lashon Hara, but it shouldn't weigh on me. Nafshika for l'chosiya, and the only way to do this is by having this anivus. That doesn't make a difference what he thinks of me, what she thinks of me. Makes a difference what HaKadosh Baruch Hu thinks. Can you imagine the final line of Shemona Esrei? It starts with everything we discussed now is in that one line. With that, if you get good at that or better at that, then Pesach Libi B'Seresecha, then you'll have the bandwidth and you'll have the ability to concentrate. And you'll be able to be matzliach more in your learning and in your hashpahs and other people, mitzvasecha, tirtaf nafshi, and all the other mitzvahs you do. Everything will be so much easier. You don't have to worry about the peripheral. One guy told me that he's very happy in the last year and a half. He just stays home with his computer. I said, why is that a maila? He said, I don't have to deal with people. I said, which is finality. I don't deal with people. I said, which people? I said, all people. I felt bad. I said, you don't like dealing with people? I'm not a tzaddik. I happen to like people. Usually, it doesn't mean I don't hear things that sometimes I don't like, but you know what? You can have selective hearing. And you don't have to answer back. That's what it's talking about over here. Nafshi kafar l'chosiyah. This is just a ticket to happiness. But you need the Yishvat Das to be able to do Avodas Hashem. So after the first line, then you could say, Pesach Libi B'Seresecha, B'Seresecha Tirtaf Nafshi. At the very end, I think this is significant, if you really have somebody who's really dangerous and out to get you, and you never said a word about them, and you can't get rid of them, then you have a right to ask, if there's anybody else left there after I finish ignoring all the bad comments and trying to be friendly, and they're still bothering me, Hashem, please just sideline this, I don't have to deal with it. You have a right to ask that, but only after you work on your own midas. So, Mitzvah Hashem, this Elul, this Yom Naraim, I'm going to try to get rid of all distractions. The more all the people, Chashuv people listening, do it, it'll spread to our families, it'll spread to our chavusas, our children, our co-workers. It might even spread to government, although I don't have such high aspirations. Can you imagine a world where everybody would just focus on every situation? What does Hashem want me to do? Does Hashem want me to worry? Does Hashem want me to act out? Does Hashem want me to be bent out of shape? The answer 99% of the time is no. And that frees up 1,000,000 hours and 1,000,000 bites in your head to be able to concentrate and do all the Torah and mitzvahs you want, b'simcha u'disha v'das. Mitzvah Hashem, it should be a year. Taka simcha yish v'das for Avodas Hashem. And gesund and nachas and Mitzvah Hashem, everybody should reach their potential. I can already wish a ksiva slima teva. That's why I picked one day into Rosh Chodesh. Have a good night.
Shem Egen Shir Torah Moses Possum, like a big Ashikach, Rabbi Viener for the inspiring drasha. Rabbi said, Shuva Tzilut Tzedakah, Ma'avir Nesroya Gzeira. We became the Tzedakah by sponsoring a share of Egen Shir Torah, putting an ad in the journal for the upcoming annual dinner next week, August 18th, Young Israel Avenue K for men, by calling Egen Shir Torah at 718-851-8651, or email ist@yeshivanet.com, and have a Chelik and Abotzas HaTorah of Egen Shir Torah worldwide throughout the year. But we bring a shekayach to the supporters of tonight's Shir Be'elam Shem, the Nishmas, Rabbi Yosef Ben Tzion, Rabbi Yaakov Zev, of Hashom Yotzeit, Chov Zainel, to the Nishmas of Tzur B'Tzor by his brother and sister-in-law from Flatbush, Avdu L'chaim L'chaim. Chananya ben Akash Marot HaKadosh Baruch Hu L'Zachis, es Yisrael Afik Chibron Torah Mitzvah Shenam Al Anei Chofes, Aman Tzidka Yagdol Torah V'Yadeh.